the I don't know how you describe him, but the ubiquitous Craig Hutchison, who is everywhere and anywhere, was hauled over the coals for gouging on ticketing prices. Everyone catch that one?
Yes, I did. I saw that.
He's got form in that respect. He tends to do it every year. He gets caught out and he goes, okay, and does it again.
You know, the one thing that gets me is when these blokes get caught doing something, they say, I take full responsibility. For fuck's sake, who else is going to take it? I mean, that's what he was saying on Channel 9 last night. I take full responsibility. Of course you do, you crook. You're the one that was doing the gouging.
Every time I see Hutchie, I picture. Everyone remember the movie Snatch? I always picture Britcop standing next to him and saying, "He's a greedy little bastard, that Hutchie."
I like that film. Good choice, Pete. Very good choice.
It is a very good comparison.
Right.
And of course, I guess the tricky bit is unfortunately, as has happened in previous weeks, it's our own club which seems to be absolutely smashing the airwaves wherever you look.
There's one other thing, Pete.
Yeah, jump in.
The biggest idiot of all this year, Willie Rioli.
Oh, sorry. How did we miss that? How did we miss that?
What a cockwomble!
Oh my goodness!
There's another cockwomble too. But keep going on, Willie.
I don't think it's really going to beat what Willie did because it looks like he's going to miss 4 years of football.
Well, apparently he couldn't. He had to provide a sample. He's there for quite some time. He just couldn't get it done, and then so he gets sort of a bit frustrated with it all. So he just puts a bloody sports drink into it. I mean, what is that? If that's right, I mean, what are you thinking? Seriously,
he wasn't, purely and simply. And the thing, so I've been involved in national championships where the drug testers have come in as well. We actually had a case of one of the athletes. She'd finished a competition. We were packing up, but she couldn't get, same issue. She couldn't get enough out for the correct amount required for the sample. And we're essentially standing there wanting to lock up the venue after we've packed up everything else, but we're having to wait around because she's still there trying to do the business. And she felt so embarrassed, and she'd been drinking so much water, but it was like, performance anxiety, it wasn't coming out. But they wait there, and it can sometimes take hours to do it, but you've got to do it.
Well, the only thing I doubt his version of it, because they get a lot of lectures during the year and every year and continuously about drugs and drug testing, etc., and the consequences of coming up with a positive, etc. And I just can't see why somebody who, even if he can't get something out, decides to pour Gatorade and then thinks you can get away with that. I mean, that's automatically putting yourself in a situation of being disqualified. So,
and what actually happens then, Macca, is that if the tester views you attempting to tamper, they then ask you to give another sample. So I think there's definitely something to say about his version of events is slightly different because he was then able to give a secondary sample. So your first sample, they have the A and the B. Then if they suspect that tampering has occurred, they request another sample. And I think I saw somebody say they kind of coaxed along the lines of, I didn't quite catch that. We just need to give you a second one because, just to make sure the view, etc. And that is then also split into an A and a B. But also, whenever the tests go in, they don't just test for drugs. They always test for urine. They do that automatically anyhow, because this is a major problem in the tampering around the world with people who are cheating, who are trying to get around the rules. So that's why tampering with your sample is punished very severely. And it really does look like I can't quite see how he can get out of the 4-year ban.
Oh, he will, because they tested him afterwards, blood tested him, and there was no illicit substances in his system.
That doesn't matter.
Well, it'll reduce it.
It'll reduce it. Surely He'll get something, but
No,
surely he won't get the maximum.
Did you read the rules?
Yes.
Did you actually read the WADA code?
Yes, I've read that. But I'm still saying that this is the AFL's testing regime. I know they conform to the WADA code.
It's gone to WADA.
Yeah, but
Because it was after a game.
Ultimately, it's up to the AFL. Just the same as it was with Essendon.
If
Nikki.
it's out of competition, it goes to the AFL. But if it's on game day, it's ASADA. And from what I understand, wasn't it after the Richmond game?
Actually, it hurts me to say this, but Nikki's right. I was listening to them talking about this, about wanting to knock it back from the 4 years to something more reasonable. But they said that would be breaking the WADA situation. And to do that would also then invoke a lack of funding from federal governments and state governments, etc.
Well, we've had swimmers test positive for substances who haven't got the maximum.
Look, I'm only repeating what they said.
Yeah, I get that, but like we've had swimmers get reduced sentences regardless of what they've taken, and they've actually physically taken stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing is there's actually more leeway regarding testing substance
Yeah, that's what they said.
Then there is tampering. Tampering is one of the worst things you can attempt to do because that's often the way they catch the cheats because they don't get the positive test.
From what I can gather, it wasn't actually an attempt to tamper. It was basically an act of frustration. And
that's an attempt to tamper under the rule.
Nikki, for God's sakes, as has been widely reported, and as you'd know, that whilst he's there trying to give a sample, the official is standing there watching him. So it's not something he did behind a door, right?
Yes.
So the official would have full view of what he did. There would have been the fact that he'd already been standing there for 4 hours trying to give a sample. So I would be highly surprised if he gets 4 years. Shocked, in fact.
Well, it will certainly be interesting to see how that plays out. Fiend, do you want to? There's just so much Adelaide stuff. Shall we? What do you reckon? Do you reckon we should jump into it? It's massive, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the obvious one is just before we do. I don't know whether people are aware. Sean Higgins ended up re-signing with the Kangaroos.
That was good pickup, mate. Because that was important because there was a lot of talk about him going to Geelong, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. And I think from memory, he has signed. Is it a 2-year extension? I think, which is a pretty big get for North because Geelong have been chasing Higgins for a while. From memory, I think they've had a crack at him previously, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah. So he's there until 2021, which will pretty much see him out in terms of his career.
They would see him out.
He's 31 now, so takes him to 33, and he'll finish his career there. So good on North for that.
It's a good signing.
Bit of other speculation around Joey Danaher. Apparently, is having a bit of trouble, or Sydney having a bit of trouble getting the Joey Danaher thing over the line. But it looks like he'll either be at Essendon or Sydney. There doesn't look to be anyone else involved. And the only other trade speculation that I've heard is the Crow stuff. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's go in chronological order, shall we? Because the first thing that happened since our last podcast is obviously Mr. Pyke.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, Don just resigned, and I guess we all saw the press conference, and it was he didn't look a happy man. Didn't look like it was something that it was a. I don't know. It just didn't look like it was sitting particularly comfortably with him, and he looked pretty shattered. And so I guess that fuels speculation that he saw the writing on the wall, or someone saw the writing on the wall for him. So I guess that's excuse me, all speculation.
That
but I think that
pointedly,
I think that he, he said that it had become apparent that whilst that he'd been, a part of the problem, but wasn't looking to be part of the solution. So I think that to me was a fairly telling remark that he made.
Yes, the other part of that sentence was along with others, which meant that he was saying that yes, he may have been part of the problem, but there were other guys as well, and I'm sure and hope that the review will pick that up.
Well, I actually
Now,
think it
just
was.
on that, I actually want to give you some credit, Fiend. How many weeks after the bye did you start talking about in the rap show? You started talking about how disillusioned Pyke was looking.
Yeah.
Because
It was apparent, wasn't it, though, Nick? We talked about it a few times.
he didn't go down to the bench, and you were the one who really kind of picked that up, and it really was a flavour after the bye.
I had to, and we'll go through. There's a few questions about all of this that probably need to be addressed one after the other. But the first thing I just want to highlight is Tex speaking on, I think it was Triple M.
Yep.
Pardon me, and saying that he had a bit of a tear in his eye. He was sad about it, and his partner was very sad about it. So obviously there wasn't any disconnection. I don't think Tex had come out and say untruth. So obviously there wasn't any disconnection between Tex and Don. And it's interesting that both those blokes have stepped away from their roles. Tex has stepped down from the captaincy, and we know that Tex is quite a divisive character, and you're either with him or against him. And I don't know. It's just I've heard a couple of other things, and Pete, you may well have heard these as well, about maybe the tail wagging the dog a little bit down at West Lakes, and I just wonder whether there's just this division that we keep hearing about between senior players and the rest of the club, rest of the playing group, with regards to who's running the show down there.
Well, there's one thing that came out of it to me as watching that is that I don't think there was any love lost between Pyke and Chapman. Chapman looked like a corpse sitting there, to be quite honest. And as far as Fagan goes, the only time Fagan seemed interested was when they talked about themselves. There was no reference by Fagan when he was talking at all to thank Don for what he'd done the years that he'd been at the club. No reference to him at all. So to me, it just looked like we had a situation that, Pyke saw the writing on the wall, because in the last couple of years, I think the relationships have decayed because
But the question that was posed, Macca, was whether the Tex and Don both stepping away from their roles is indicative of a fracture between sections of the playing group. We'll get to the other stuff in a minute.
I think that there is, and I think, Fiend, you've only got to go back to, midway through last year. You and our loyal listeners will remember that we were fortunate enough to be, at that time, getting a feed of information from somebody who is anonymous, who was clearly very, very close to the club, and fed us a whole lot of stuff that came true.
Yeah.
And I copied you into all of that, and you saw it all.
Yep.
And I think that the thing that has really, really struck me is two things. And to answer your question first, is that it was very, very clear in the information that we got that there were fractures and cliques in the playing group.
Yeah.
That was made perfectly clear.
No doubt.
That there was Tex's group, and then there was everybody else. And I guess the second thing that flowed from that is just how serious the camp was. And I think that I think a lot of people were very happy to side with the club on that, and I think they were very happy to think that it was a media beat up. But I think that as time has gone on, I think that we can now. We can go back to those messages that we got, and we can see that just how serious that we were being alerted to the fact that the camp was.
Yeah.
But to answer so I think that's a really, really important issue that I still don't think that a lot of people have got their heads around just to how damaging that was.
And
but I think that to answer your first question, there's no question in my mind that there's some fractures down there amongst the playing group, and Tex is in the middle of that.
Yeah, and the reason, and Mac, I didn't mean to cut you off, and we certainly will cover the rest of what you were saying, but I just wanted to get through this point first, because to me this goes all the way back to the beginning, to the aftermath of the grand final in 2017. We had, because let's look at it. We had talk of Tex having a dust up with Lever at halftime. We've had talk of the players splitting out after the game and basically no contact after the grand final for a period of weeks. We had the situation where before the grand final and in fact all the way through the final series, we had the power stance, which for all reports was instigated by Tex as a result of his ongoing conversations with Collective Minds and Don. All those things. And then we get into the preseason of 2018 and all of a sudden the players are going on a mind strengthening camp. So the implication obviously is that the blame was put fairly and squarely at the playing group, either directly or indirectly, that they weren't mentally tough enough to deal with what occurred on grand final day. Now, that implication would have come from Don Pyke, it would have come from Tex Walker, and it would have come from members of the leadership group. And that's evidenced by the fact that when you go to Collective Minds website, and I haven't been since we went through all that last year, but at the time, the people from the Adelaide Crows who were endorsing the Collective Minds program were Tex Walker, Rory Sloane, Daniel Talia, Don Pyke. Those people were on the Collective Minds website espousing the benefits of the Collective Minds program. So, and we had Rory Sloane come out and say he found it of great benefit. We had other guys come out and say it was a great benefit, but they were all part of that leadership, senior small group within the playing group. So the implication is that Don and the senior players, or that small group of senior players, blamed the rest of the playing group for the capitulation in the 2017 grand final. They then alienated the rest of the playing group by putting them through a camp that, for all intents and purposes, was designed to break down the playing group. Right, that was its ultimate goal. With it, like, forget all tied to trees and all that sort of stuff. The specific purpose of that camp was to break the playing group and rebuild them. That's what it was about. And then we have the situation with the 2018 season being a train wreck with the mismanagement of the injuries, etc., etc., etc. And then we have players leaving. We have Jakey Lever leaving. We have Mitch McGovern leaving.
Charlie Cameron
leaving. And, none of those blokes on good terms with the club, certainly on good terms with elements of the playing group, but not with the club itself. They left on bad terms. And here we are now.
Josh Franco, Tate Kaesler.
Well, Josh and Tate apparently had words with Camporelli and others about the camp. We had David Teague leaving the club. These are quality individuals. So there's just this ongoing theme of this small bunch of players and coach, and probably Brett Burton in there too, because he had a connection with the Collective Minds people from his time in Brisbane. And I think that's where the whole fissure is within the club. It's from the 2017 grand final loss, and where the fingers were pointing after that, and who was doing the finger pointing. That's my read.
Well, Barney Magic makes a point in the chat that a contact there of them said that Burton got sensitive information out of the players and passed it on to Collective Minds.
Yeah, we said that last year. We knew that.
Yeah, but it then passed on. It was used against them. So
we knew that.
Well, that's disastrous, isn't it? You just broken trust.
Yeah, exactly right, Mackie. You've got multiple breaches of trust. And when you're talking about leadership, once you've lost trust, that's the end of it. You may as well go. And we've seen the way and I won't carry on, but we've seen the way that the players have played this season, and the way it fell away so quickly when they basically lost engagement with the game plan. And there was, as Nikki pointed out, it was noticeable that Don seemed to have a disconnect with the players at the back end of the season. It all seems...
And yet at the start of the season, there was a good connect.
Yeah, but was that a facade? Because it was all fun and games down at Adelaide this pre-season, remember?
Yeah, correct.
But even those
absolutely
games, we lost the first couple, and then he started going down the bench, and he was getting more actively involved, and we started playing better.
Oh, that's
So
when he
it's a
played that shutdown game
up and
style,
down.
Nick.
Yeah.
He changed the game plan, remember? He played the
Yeah,
shutdown
he did.
game plan.
And the players bought into it.
Well, did they buy into it, or was it just... Sorry, Pete. Did they buy into it, or was it just a means to an end? Because ultimately, we didn't stop playing that game style, but the players discarded it. Anyway, sorry, I'll shut up.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we don't know.
Well, the other thing I was going to say... Sorry, Pete.
I'll take a number.
Well, I was just going to say that everything you just said, Fiend, happened also against the backdrop of one of the most dysfunctional football teams that you could ever see. No, not the team, but the
Football department. Well, one begets the other,
That's the
doesn't
word.
it?
Yeah, the football department. So you've got a dysfunctional football department. It's headed up by Burton, and who's totally inadequate for the position, totally not qualified in any respect. And then, of course, we had the situation of the camp, and then we had, like, he broke their trust, and then we had the situation of they brought in the Kangatek and broke every player down and just kept on doing it until they were stopped, and they had to bring in an outside consultant. So then we had Justin Reid appointed. He had all plates all over him. We just had a totally dysfunctional football department. And yet you've got this situation happening with the camp and with the breach of trust, etc. And yet the club does a review at the end of 2018 and says that everything was all okay. I mean, we've got, so that doesn't say, that says not only is the football department absolutely clueless, so is the administration, so is the board.
Peter.
Yeah, right. If I can just swing this back round to Don Pyke. I think the other thing, Fiend, that happens is that when we talk about the breach of trust with the playing group, that was obviously self-evident. But what was, I think, in the end, a major contributor to Don's downfall was what ended up happening with the camp, and the way that was managed is that it ended up being a massive breach of trust with the supporter base.
Yeah.
And so he didn't just lose the players, but when they managed it in such a way as to tell everybody that nothing was wrong, and there was no issues, there was no dramas, it was everything was fine, and then it kept coming back. It kept biting and biting and biting till eventually we had that disastrous press conference with Don Pyke and Brett Burton, and then they came out and eventually said, well, yes, actually there was some damage done out of the camp. And so what ended up happening, and then of course we're into this year, and still things are coming out about the camp. And what I think was, in the end, what was truly fatal for Don was the fact that there ended up being a tsunami of anger from the supporter base. And I genuinely believe that at the heart of that anger was the fact that we all felt that we'd been misled. We'd been misled by the football department. And Don Pyke was at the heart of that. And so I think I've never seen, the degree of anger that supporters have had, and I think that it was a manifestation of that real breach of trust that we'd been quite openly and quite bald-facedly misled by Don Pyke as to what was actually going on with that camp.
Yeah. Now, I just need to interrupt because we've just had word, and it's been talked about on the chat as well, that Rory and Belinda Sloan have had a little boy, happy and healthy, Sonny Leo Sloan. So given the trauma that they've gone through over the last 18 months, that's fantastic. So
absolutely
congratulations
wonderful news
to the Sloans and their extended family. And we need Sloaney to stay with the club so Sonny Leo can be in the, what would that be, the 2040 draft or something like that?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Anyway,
so where does that leave us now? So where does that leave us now? We've lost Don. The review is ongoing, and there's a lot. We hear a lot about what's going to happen with that, and the fact that there may well be further shake-ups. But in the meantime, I think the thing that question is on everybody's lips is the coach. Who are we going to get?
Yeah.
Well, just on that particular point, though, there was a point that I saw on the news tonight where Rashuto was saying that they can't really proceed with the appointment of a coach until review finishes, which finishes apparently this Friday, because out of that review is supposed to come what we're supposed to be looking for in a coach. Now, I'm sure that we must have some idea, or maybe we don't. But he said that tomorrow the makeup of that panel will be announced, and Friday is the end of the review, and out of that was supposed to come the detail that panel is supposed to use when they appoint the next coach.
Well, it makes sense, obviously, Mac, doesn't it, that if they're going to try and get to the crux of what's going on, that they can't be proceeding that with a coaching appointment, because they need to know what qualities they're looking for. But
that's what Rue said.
Just to backtrack a little bit, Peter, I think in terms of the coach, do we all agree that there's some fairly deep-seated issues at the club? And I think that some of these are systemic and been at the club for years and years, and others have been magnified over the last maybe 3 or 4 years by circumstance and personnel. But is it fair to say that the bigger outcome, for me, the bigger outcome of the review is not who we get for coach, but who else apart from Don, sees himself as not part of the solution and steps down, because at the moment only Don's been man enough to call himself out.
Correct.
And B, who does the reviewer, Jason Dunstall or Matthew Pavlik, or the combination of those people, who will they identify as not being part of the solution? Because I think that also has a big say, not only in who we appoint as coach, but the makeup of our playing list for 2020.
Is there a clue, the fact that in terms of an internal appointment to the interview panel, that there is only Fagan and Rashuto?
Big clue, in my opinion.
So no Brett Burton as football manager? Would you normally have the football manager on?
Yes.
Every club
panel?
Every club's football manager is on the recruitment panel, because the coach reports to the football manager.
Which has me feeling slightly hopeful.
Yes,
Because
I've got my optimism up for that reason.
It's only slightly, but it's slightly above negative.
Yeah, because it could just well be the club trying to avoid a potentially embarrassing situation in the event that Burton is asked to leave or pushed aside or whatever. If they're going through a review process or a selection process with a coach, and then all of a sudden they come out and say, "Oh, by the way, Bird, you're out." Maybe they're just trying to avoid that. Burton's been quite conspicuous in his absence to all of this. It's been driven by Chapman very much, and that's Chappie's style. He likes to be front and centre when he can get a bit of mileage out of it. Fagan has been pretty subdued, but Chapman in particular, but also Andrew, have pointed out that it's a review into the football department. So I guess that's why you don't see prominent people from the football department having much of a say. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
So I don't know whether it necessarily indicates that Burton's out or in or whatever.
No, I think they'll move him sideways. I don't think they'll sack him. But I think they may well move him sideways.
Yeah, I think he could go down to where they sell all the gear, and he could do some packing in the back.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen, Mako. Look, I don't know. I'm still not confident. I'm still thinking this is a whitewash, and I'm really, really disappointed with Scott Camporelli, because
he's got to go.
Well, be that as it may, if Don Pyke thinks that he's not part of the solution, then how can his senior assistant think that he's part of the solution?
That's my whole point.
How does that work?
Absolutely.
And just on that, Phoenix, absolute credit to Don for stepping up and saying, I was part of the problem and the best solution is actually me not being here. That ability in yourself to recognise that and take that step. Now, to be fair, he's probably got to something else lined up at Freo, there's an opportunity there for him. So he's not stepping out into nothing. And we know that he's been very successful in his own business, and he was coaching for the love of it, not because he had to for a job. Whereas for somebody like Camporelli now, etc., that is their job and they have to survive. But his ability to step up and actually admit that you're part of the problem is one of the most important things you can do when you're in that situation.
Well, I think the very fact that the two of them are there clinging on it tells you all that you need to know.
Yep.
Particularly Brett Burton, because he was in that press conference too, and he's breached trust with the not only with the playing group but with the supporter base as well.
That's right. And Tex in his own way, I think, has admitted he's part of the problem. Having stepped aside from the captaincy, there's probably an element of him just wanting to play his days out, but I don't think Tex would do that if he had the support of the players. Do you?
No.
I'm with you there.
So it's going to be very interesting to see what the last couple of years of Tex's career is like. But Camporelli, for me, is the one. Just to finish this. Yeah, go
on. He's also always been of the mind of if you are becoming a father, family, etc., then that will take away from what you're doing as a footballer, and you need to take those step backs because you also do have to look after family. So I think there's also that part of it.
Does that mean that he feels that Sloaney needs to resign next year?
Possibly.
Look,
I don't buy that either.
The big issue is Camporelli because whereas you rightly point out, Nicky, that Don steps away with probably at least 3 or 4 opportunities in front of him. If he wants to stay in AFL football, I would be amazed if he doesn't land himself a job with another club. Could you say the same about Scott Camporelli if he stepped away from the Adelaide Football Club after 10.5 years?
He should.
No.
Would he get another job anywhere?
He's never talked about. Never talked about when jobs come up.
It's an interesting point.
He was for a little bit after he took over when Walshy died. But every other job that's kind of come up since then, they talk about all the other assistants. They never mention him, which is piss poor on the part of his manager's job about not getting his name out there.
Well, you'd expect that his manager was to get his name out there if he wanted his name to be out there. But I think this is the thing. I think Scott Camporelli, for whatever reason, and it may even hark back to when Triggy was around, has a job with the Adelaide Crows as far as the eye can see.
Yep.
But I don't think that can last because when you bring a new coach in, he's going to have every right to have what coaching panel he wants to have.
He survived five, isn't it? It's 5, I reckon.
I understand that.
He survived 5 coaches.
I totally agree. But we've never had a review of this magnitude before.
No, but we've had strong coaches come in. Phil Walsh was a strong character, and yet he couldn't budge Scott Campo out of that chair.
Well, we'll see. I think he must go. He has to go. If there's going to be a fair... Because he is part of the problem. He's along with Don Pyke. He's part of the problem, as is Ben Hart, etc.
Well, time will tell. And I'm still of the mind that this review, to some extent, is a whitewash. And I think that the review has already claimed its primary target in Don Pyke. I think there might be some shuffling of the chairs, and I think there might be 1 or 2 sacrificial lambs that are of little consequence. I think I said last week, Mick Godden, I think, will be lucky to survive. And I don't know about Ben Hart.
There's a job at the Eagles.
I still don't know whether it's going to claim the 2 scalps that we all feel it should claim. And it definitely, by design, will not capture the head of the fish. And to me, that's a big, big problem.
You're talking about Fagan?
Oh, I'm talking about Chapman.
No, Chappie.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Chapman, I don't have a problem with Andrew Fagan. Andrew Fagan is the CEO of the club, and our club is in a very strong financial position. he's doing his job, and to my way of thinking, the chain of command goes from Brett Burton to Mark Ricciuto to Rob Chapman, and interestingly enough, Chapman, Rue, and Burton have not been. Well, Burton has been, I guess, but Chapman and Rue, in the manner in which they've actually instigated this review, have actually put themselves outside of the scope.
They have. You're quite correct. But by the same token, I reckon I'd be very, very surprised if Rue didn't step down after the appointment of the coach.
No, not a chance. Not a chance, Macca.
No.
Yep.
I'd be prepared. I'd be prepared to bet the next 5 letterboxes that you have to buy.
Well, that comes up pretty regularly. So,
Mark Ricciuto will not step down. Not a chance.
Well, I'm going to stick my neck out and say I think he will, because I think he may have had a gutful of this whole thing himself. You know,
No, he's the next chairman.
Nah. Yeah.
Nope.
He's the one that Chappie is getting ready to take over. I bet you.
no, I
And-
can't.
Well, you will. It's Chappie. I actually did think this would actually been a good poll to put up on Twitter. So who has the worst media performance? Was it Chapman at the Pyke press conference or Brett Burton after the camp?
Oh.
Which one was worse?
Bird is like he's in a league of his own.
Yeah, that
in
was
terms of rubbish.
class.
That was elite rubbish.
Chappie didn't do himself any favours though.
If Chappie was any kind of leader of an organisation, he would have had Bird out the door the very next day.
Absolutely.
Correct. That's 100% correct.
Yeah.
I think that what will happen is, Rue has to work. He's got a wife and 6 kids to support, and he's a media personality. And there's a major conflict between his media and his role with the Adelaide Football Club, which you yourself pointed out, Fiend, that he was always criticising the coach, and the coach should do this and the coach should do that, and which is really out of school, really.
Well, he got his target, didn't he, Mac?
He got his target all right.
I mean, it was obvious. It was obvious from 4 weeks before the end of the season. It was obvious. But
he shouldn't have been doing that.
Had lost Ricciuto's support. Well, yeah, but you think that. Mark Ricciuto wouldn't think that. Mark Ricciuto wouldn't think that, though.
It's been said by many a person that he shouldn't, and he's also that he's got a conflict of interest. And
that's nice.
I think he should.
He's not going to listen.
And I think he will.
Nah.
But why would he? Why would he?
Why?
Because he doesn't need all this shit. He doesn't get a penny for it.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Yeah, he does.
Are you kidding me? No.
Oh,
Macca,
yes, he
come on,
does.
mate. All the relationships that he makes through this, and all the networking. No, I'm sorry, Mac. You undervalue why Mark Ricciuto is on the board in the first place, and you underestimate Mark Ricciuto's ego. There's no way that Mark Ricciuto will step away from the Adelaide Football Club having been seen to have made a bad decision. Mark Ricciuto is a champion of the club, and is a much loved past player who values that standing immensely. And anything that diminishes that standing or the manner in which people view him, he will look to rectify. There's no way he will leave on a sour note. He'll leave on a high.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just see. That's only an opinion of mine. It's not based on any fact. I just think that why would he want to keep on doing it with all the crap that he's received? You know, Rude's mates and all the rest of it. He's had a lot of criticism.
Just looking to the new coaches or the potential new coaches, I did have a pretty reliable whisper come my way yesterday. So just to put a name out there from a pretty reliable source, that is not necessarily going to be, we don't know for sure this is going to be the person, but it will put it that this person is absolutely in the mix up to his eyeballs, and that is Jared Schofield, the assistant coach at Port Adelaide. So he is a name to keep an eye on. He is as most of you would know, his record, he was a 3-time premiership coach in the Waffle, and of his 6 years he had 3 flags and 2 runners-up. and he then went to Port Power. Interestingly, we chased Jared Schofield as an assistant coach in 2016, but he chose to stay with Subiaco for a little bit longer to put a couple of things right. And we then chased him again in 2018, but Port beat us to that one. Of course, an old Port Premiership player in their one and only Premiership. So obviously some close ties there for Jared. But
what's the rap on Jared Schofield?
Look, what I'm hearing is that he's pretty. He has a certain level of old school about him, pretty authoritarian in a way, but also a good manager of people, but doesn't take any crap. So that's kind of, if you want to put it in a nutshell, I guess that's kind of it. But very, very highly regarded by the Crows, has been for a number of years. And
West Coast have been chasing him as well, hadn't they?
Yeah. So I'm understanding that he is right in the mix, and that obviously he chose Port for an assistant role, but of course for the lead role, that probably changes things a little bit. So anyway, I just throw that one out there as one that came from a pretty reliable source.
Do we reckon he's been in the system long enough?
Well, he's only been in the system for 1 year.
I mean, he's no different to Marty Mattner. Marty Mattner's record is almost identical. And Marty Mattner's played in an AFL Premiership.
Mm.
And he's done development work at Sydney before he went back. So Marty's actually been in 2 football AFL systems.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that whisper too, Pete. And I'm sure he'll get interviewed because apparently he's a quality bloke. I just feel like there's not much difference between him and Mattner, and I think there's far more experienced. I'd be shocked, actually, if they appointed Jared Schofield. Absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you there, Fane. Would not disagree. I'd certainly be shocked as well. So, but that's the name we were given.
Yeah.
And to be fair, and you'd know, Fane, it wasn't given as a this is a lock. It was just this is someone that's in the mix.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm not discounting that at all. I've just been thinking about it after and thought, I don't know what I know he's had great success in the waffle, and I know he's held in good esteem, but he's no different to a bloke we've already got on the panel. So
true.
True enough. I mean, the names have been bandied around. Obviously, Essendon have taken Truck off the table, and it's far too much of a coincidence for my liking that they've chosen to announce this succession plan.
That'd be deliberate. That would have been deliberate.
Yeah, forced on them, I think, by the situation, not only at Adelaide but also at Fremantle, I think. Obviously, highly sought after Truck.
Thoughts on Scott Burns, Fane?
Well, I think I might have been the first person in history. No, I named Scott Burns about a month ago, Mac.
You did.
And I'm standing by it.
Did we name him last time?
Just wanted to throw a couple of things at you, which I read, which I thought was strange. You look at his pedigree. He's been at the 3 good clubs: West Coast, Collingwood, Hawthorn. So that is a big tick. The one thing that is a bit of a negative about it is that totals 11 years that he's been at those 3 clubs, and they've only been in the final 3 times when he's been there.
Yeah, but
that's.
Sorry,
sorry, Fane. Just I'll wrap this up pretty quickly because that's misleading. I think because I think that what that shows is that he was there during rebuilds, and I think that or resets, and I think it's really important that you've got somebody that has that experience, and then that seems to work for him. So I discount that.
I just threw it out there.
No. I saw the same figures that you would have seen, Mac. It was all over Twitter, wasn't it?
Mm.
And so that was all I was going to say, Fane, is that I think that it just shows that he's in for the fight.
100% agree. 100% agree, Pete. And I also would say that an assistant coach has very, very, very little impact on whether a team makes a final series. It's all about the list management, it's all about the fitness staff, and it's all about the head coach.
That's all true. Yeah.
And it's certainly a senior assistant absolutely might have a bit of impact. But I don't put a lot of store in that. I put more store in the fact that he's been in big clubs under a lot of scrutiny. Those clubs, both as a player, a captain, and also as an assistant coach in that program, and that he's currently, after 10 years in the system, been sought out by Alistair Clarkson to be on the Hawthorn coaching panel, and Clarko has a good record in terms of picking people that he wants around him.
That's a very good point. No,
Except for Bolton.
Oh, but Bolton was a good assistant. He just didn't cut the mustard as a head coach. And not everyone has got that. But I would love to have Brett Bolton in our program, and I would love to see Brendan Bolton, take Camporelli's spot as senior assistant. I would love to see that. If you put Brendan Bolton in as senior assistant with someone like a Scotty Burns, or another bloke that I'll throw out there, Brett Montgomery, or another bloke that I'll throw out there, Matthew Nix, I think that's pretty solid, because Bolton's had 2 or 3 years in the system. He's a Hawthorn bloke. Clarkson is a big rat for him, and he might not be head coach material, but he's got a head on his shoulders nonetheless.
So apart from Burns, who are the other guys in the mix there?
There's Carousella, who's been mentioned.
I don't think he wants it though, by all reports.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to come here. I think he wants He wants a job in Melbourne.
But he's been an assistant for 100 years. I don't actually think he wants a head coaching role. That's what I've always heard. Yeah.
I think he wanted the Essendon one, but he didn't get it.
Matthew Nix is not a bad shout.
Yeah, you're talking about Schofield's qualities. That's what I've heard about Nix. That he's pretty straight down the line, but he's not bad at building relationships either. Played in the successful Sydney era. Was he around when Port played in their premiership? I don't think he was.
Not sure.
No, it would be, but yeah, and South Australian person, so he knows the fishbowl, which I don't think can be discounted, to be honest. Wouldn't be the worst selection.
No.
Well, the only other ones I can think of, just Justin Muir.
Longmuir.
You got a Freo, I think.
Yeah, Longmuir.
Longmuir, Justin Longmuir, sorry.
Longmuir, but there's a Freo job, remember?
But has he already committed?
Well, no, but he's obviously being a Western Australian. He's obviously.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's part of
Sam Mitchell.
Sam Mitchell's only been 1 year in the system, Macca.
2.
And he's gone back to Hawthorn. No, he was a player.
He's only been a coach this year. He was 1 year as a coach at West Coast.
One year at West Coast, and then he came back. Yeah, that's right. 2 years. He's too green.
And how green is Montgomery?
Well, I think he was at Port for about 5 or 6 years, wasn't he?
I actually like Montgomery. He does a lot of the front end work for Port Adelaide, and I think he always speaks very factually and very sensibly. And I don't know whether he's the right guy or not, but I'd be very happy to have him as one of our assistant coaches, and he might just be the one that could be good enough for a senior coach job. I think he will be one day. I'm pretty sure he will be one day.
I was saying that about Lee Tudor for a while.
He'd certainly be interesting. Fane, we mentioned at the top some player movement or player rumour movement as well of ours. Were you alluding to the ones that were really flicking around today about Rory Laird meeting with Brisbane?
Well, we've got Source Jacobs apparently signing for 2 years at GWS. Tim Watson went with that on SEN this morning, so that seems to be pretty solid.
I'm fine with that.
Pardon?
I'm fine with that.
I'm not disappointed with that. And, if Source wants another 2 years in an AFL system, he's probably gone to the right place, because the chances are he won't get it at Adelaide. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't mind betting that culturally that will be a positive for the Adelaide Crows as well. Any bloke that doesn't want to turn up for the SANFL finals, to me, can get stuffed as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, very ordinary.
And yeah, as you pointed out, Pete, Laird and also Brodie Smith mentioned in dispatches in discussions with Brisbane Lions.
But I think that was because they were up in Queensland, not understanding how close they are with Charlie. that they'll probably up there to support Charlie in the finals on their holiday.
I think it's pretty firm that Rory Laird is having a chat with Brisbane. I can't talk about Brody, but they're pretty tight. But I would I'm pretty comfortable that Lairdy's having a chat with Brisbane.
Well, if you just taking Laird, if he wanted out, would you do it? I would.
Of course you would. They're both
Laird in a heartbeat.
Yeah, they've got to pay.
Lairdy in a heartbeat. Absolute heartbeat.
Yep, because I reckon you could fish something pretty good out of Brisbane for that.
You would. I
don't actually think there's many players not tradable. In the phase that we're in, if the club is fair dinkum, and if let's not talk about bottoming out and all that sort of stuff. But if the club is fair dinkum on rebuilding culture, you've got to get rid of the top, because that's where the cultural change is going to happen, and then you have to cut your losses and use as much currency as you've got available to you to make the rebuild as quick as filled with quality as you possibly can. Brodie Smith, love him as a player. I said 2 years ago we should have cashed in on Brodie Smith, and I don't disagree that we should cash in on Brodie Smith now. Lairdy's in the same boat. I think there's a couple of others in the same boat as well. We're obviously thinking about doing it with Alex Keith, although that's gone a bit quiet, probably because teams are still in the finals. But Lairdy and Smithers are the type of player that you need to cash in your chips on if you're going to go for a full rebuild, in my view.
Because you're going to get value, and particularly in the case of Laird, and I'm sorry to say it, but if you look at a player that you balance in terms of getting the most for losing the least, he is just an absolute classic.
100% agree.
You can market him as a two-time All-Australian, which he is, recent, club best and fairest. So there's got to be a lot of cachet to that, and he's been really, really good for us. But I think he's a player that's particularly with Lockie Shoal coming up, he's eminently replaceable.
And the thing is with Lairdy, I don't think the new rules help him.
No, that's right. That may well be.
And whilst people have said, his stats look good this year, to the eye though, they might look good, but he was not effective at all.
No, he didn't.
He was. No. And he didn't cope.
The other one that was a bit interesting through the week, guys, was Brodie Grundy coming out with his manager, I assume, coming out with a big story about basically wanting to go home. Now, my read on that was that was very much that Collingwood aren't quite there with what they want, and so we better just remind them of the pull of home, just to try and get that Collingwood deal over the line. So that's my read on that.
I read it slightly differently. No, because he's a very different type of cat. He's not your normal cat, and he openly talks about the lure of home and etc. Now he may be doing exactly what you said, Pete. But he's also the type of guy that just might be also doing what he's thinking. In other words, he's thinking and saying it out loud. Because if he came to Adelaide, he would only come to Adelaide if he got something like a 6 or 7 year contract with a huge amount of money. That's the only way he would come. And that would put him back into where his family is, where his brother is, where he could have his kids and all the rest of it. He could have everything that he likes in life. And he's got an Adelaide girlfriend as well. So it's I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility. It may, however, out of the realms of possibility. No, it may, however, be that Collingwood have only offered a 3-year contract, and Buckley at this stage has said they won't go any further than 3 years because they don't want to commit their long-term future. But they may well renege on what they said and offer him what he wants. But in fact, I'm sure that if he doesn't get offered what he wants, he would come home.
I would remind you all of a little podcast that happened at about, round 1, 2, 3 this year, where I said categorically that Brodie Grundy wanted to come home.
You did?
And that was on the back of the co-host of the Rev Up show, who is the same age as Mr. Grundy, who
you did say
has
that,
a few battle scars from playing on Mr. Grundy, and who moves in a similar, in the same circle as Mr. Grundy. And I'll just leave it right there.
The interesting thing is, and somebody has raised in the chat, let's say, for example, we actually do get Grundy that at the end of this year or the end of next year. Where does that leave young Rob? What do we do with him?
Trade
Release him in the twos.
I mean, who cares? Macca, who cares? Who cares?
Get Grundy.
For God's sake, Brody
him.
Grundy is an absolute superstar. An absolute superstar.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying, what are you going to do with it?
Cool, you trade him.
He'll play twos. Trade him or play twos.
Yeah, play twos. You've still got to have a ruck backup and a quality one. And the thing is, we know with Rob is that he will fight to try and get that spot back. Now, he's not of the same quality as Brody, no.
Nowhere near it.
But he's still a decent AFL ruckman.
Yep.
You know, and you don't quite know whether they could play two, or he can play in the twos. Or
He'll either be happy to
or we maximise his value.
He can run around and play twos for $300,000 a year, or someone will pick him up and pay him a bit more, and he can go and be a first ruckman somewhere.
Now, the thing about Grundy, we've spoken about, would you bother spending all that money on Grundy? And I think earlier in the season, most of us were of the mind that, it's not quite the right timing because we probably need a bit more class in the midfield, etc., etc. And even I, as bullish as I am on Brody, I was quite happy to concede that it didn't look like the stars were quite in the right spot. But in the context of a full rebuild, in the context of having young midfielders, and in the context of needing a little bit of star power and a little bit of marquee down the spine, I actually think, whether it happens, I think it'll actually happen this year. But if it doesn't happen this year, I think I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen at free agency next year. But I actually think now is the perfect time for Brody Grundy, because we'll have money in the cap. We can give him a long-term deal. He can run that midfield. We can set up a team around him. He'll be what is he, about 20? How old's Cam? 25. So he'll be 26, right, next season. It's actually the perfect time in the current context for Brody Grundy to come to Adelaide.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And so we paying pick 3? Is that what it's going to take?
Well, it depends what we can get for this other mob.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
You look at what other currency you have that you also will need to put some other quality players around him. We've definitely got some good quality coming through in our juniors we have at the moment, but you still need more.
Sorry, Fanny, you're alluding to what can we get from like a Laird or
from Laird or Smith or those
Keith,
blokes.
Greenwood.
Yep.
I don't think we get much for Greeny or even Keith. I'd be surprised if we get much more than a mid-second rounder for Alex, as good a season as he's had. But Laird and Smith are the two. Brisbane don't have a lot of currency. They might have to go and get something to give it to us. We've also got the situation, I guess, with Lukosius, although that seems to have gone a little bit quiet, Peter. Of late, although he hasn't signed anything. It's just gone dead quiet. And I don't know. Brody Grundy is a known quantity. Luco had a great second half of the season. I don't think we can... we probably won't have the currency to have both. So, I don't know. Who would you go for?
Yeah, good call. Look, at the moment, I'd probably go Grundy, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I think that if we went Grundy this year, I don't think Luco would sign it. If he doesn't sign a contract, that means that he'll probably do his 2 years and then come home next year. So that will work.
I just don't know how we get out of paying pick 3 for Grundy. I don't know how we would get out of that. I think Colin just...
No, you'd have
to. He's contracted, so it's not like we've got any, so they would just say it was pick 3 or, GTFO.
Yeah. And look, is he pick 3 worthy?
Probably.
Grundy.
In our, I'm not saying he's not good enough to warrant pick 3, but in our circumstances where we're probably a midfielder short, or 2 maybe even, and a little bit of a question mark around our forward line going forward, depending on how things pan out with a couple of players, are we going to throw pick 3? It might end up being pick 4 at Brodie Grundy.
Well, it might be that it doesn't happen this year, and we wait to pick him up as a free agent. That might be the deal we strike with him.
Yeah, maybe.
Look, that's why I think we'll get him this year, because I think Collingwood will want something for him, and I think they'll get more from him from us than they will in compensation.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's what I said before, that when you're throwing out that pick 3 idea, you have to look at what other currency you actually have. I think you would only do that if you're getting some things back, that still keeps you somewhere in the first round where we need to make.
Yeah, so I reckon, to answer my own question, I think given the relative strength of the draft this year, I think you go for the known quantity marquee player if he's available, and pick 3 is quite all right. My worry is that Collingwood will want more than pick 3, and that's where it gets a little bit dicey.
Well, that's up to the list management people to make it work.
Yeah. So that's one coming back. I haven't really, not that I can think of. Peter, have you heard of any other whispers of any other players at the moment?
That's all I got.
Yeah. So we're in a state of flux at the moment, aren't we? Bloody no coach. Players wanting away with, like, even Cam Ellis-Yeoman, who I'd be disappointed to lose, to be honest. Wants away. The Crouchers look like staying.
Which we're the ones we actually think should go.
Well, yeah, potentially. So I can't remember a more tumultuous time around the Adelaide Football Club. Even the camp wasn't as tumultuous.
Hasn't been one. No. Well, the interesting thing is, Ray was talking about the search for the new coach. And Ray has got a contact with a club that's been feeding him some reasonably good information of late. And he said, how would you like to be rude? You're going looking for a new coach, and you're saying to the new coach, come to our football club. We haven't got a football director at the moment, not a football director, a football manager at the moment. And Campo's going as well. And the list management is under scrutiny as well, but come along. So he said there could also be a plus by saying to the guy, well, at least you'll be able to form something around you that you want.
Well, I think that's actually the bait, Macca, because I think we will be without a footy director. I think we will be without, a couple of blokes in that coaching panel. Ben Hart, I don't think will survive. I don't think Mick Godwin will survive, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't think Scott Camporelli will survive. So the bait is we're going to give you your own team, which is unprecedented for Adelaide, because we don't usually allow coaches coming in to pick their own assistant panel. But I think But I think that'll be part of the lure for the coach. And maybe another part of the lure for the coach is the fact that we're going to spend some big money on a couple of marquee players over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
Anyway, I don't know where else we can take this conversation, because it's all speculation at the moment.
Well, the interesting thing is, Fiend, is that this is the speculation stage. Friday is the end of the review. Tomorrow we'll know the coaching panel. So when we meet next Tuesday and talk about it, we really might have something of substance. We might even be, hopefully, fingers crossed, talking about the departure of people like Burton and Camporelli. We can only hope.
Well, I guess
go. Sorry, go.
No, go, mate.
No, mate. I was just going to say it's almost 10 o'clock, so I'm about to turn into a pumpkin. So
Halloween is coming.
Sorry, Fang, what were you?
You'd fetch a nice price if you were a pumpkin about now.
I guess the only question, Pete, and I'd like your answer on this, what your thoughts are.
Sure.
when the review is over and all the rest of it, how much do you think we're going to know? How much do you think they're going to tell us?
Oh, look, I think it'll just be, couched in very, very general terms. That there were, I think they'll probably cough up that there were, failings, and that
there are learnings.
There were learnings, and there were things that we could have done better, and
reflections.
And reflections. It'll be general corporate speak, as we know, and as I said, there's every chance that there'll be a bit of a clear out, but I would be very, very surprised if guys like Camporelli and Burton exit. Campo might end up being assistant at the AFLW or something like that, and Bird might end up being general administrator for I don't know, for the baseball team. And they'll all be retained, but it would be a big shuffle around. And it was decided that what we needed was a fresh start, and the only way we're going to get the new coach is to give him what he wanted and all that kind of hoo ha. It'll all be gift wrapped.
Yep.
But they haven't really pre-announced.
Everyone will escape with their reputations intact, and the only person who will be sacked will be the coach.
Yep.
Well, that was pre-announced that they will not release the findings of the review, but they will release the actions that they're taking out of the review. So we'll never know. We will never know what Dunson, etc., is saying.
Pyke wasn't sacked. I'm sorry, he resigned. But you know what I mean.
Yes, no termination payment. I agree, Pete. I think it'll be results oriented. I don't think there'll be any airing of dirty laundry. I think people will be very protected within the system. I mean, I don't think you retain Scott Camporelli for 10 or 11 years and then throw him on the scrap heap. I think it's clear that he's a club favourite son for whatever reason, and he will have some role. The irony, I think, that might happen is that if Mr. Burton does move on to greener pastures, then Scott Camporelli might end up being the football director.
On that note, I'm pulling.
You're a cruel man, Pete. You're a cruel man.
All right, Pete.
I'm going to catch you later, guys.
We needed a laugh.
See you night, Pete.
See you, Pete.
Well, look, I think that's probably where, as far as we can take this conversation anyway, because it's all speculation. We can go round and round in circles. The bottom line is that I think there's still a lot of mistrust between the supporters and the club. I don't think we're taking a lot of what they're saying at face value, and that remains, for me, the biggest disappointment is that I can't trust the people that I'm giving my money to in terms of supporting the club. And I'll continue to lament, the road that we turned our back on from 2015, because that was the type of club that I wanted. So hopefully that sort of thing gets highlighted as part of this review. But yeah, I'm still not hopeful.
Yeah, I don't think there's, as I said, they did announce right from the beginning that they won't be releasing what the panel says to them. All they will be releasing is what the actions they're going to take out of that. So, but I still think we've got a very interesting week or two ahead of us anyhow. Very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to have all this wrapped up before trade week, and probably a couple of weeks before trade week, so that we can actually give Justin Reid some air, assuming that Justin remains. And I think it would be disastrous if Justin didn't remain. We saw what happened during the transition between Noble and Reedy. He messed up the Gibbs trade. We wouldn't want a similar thing because someone new drops in. Maybe Scott Camporelli can be our new list manager as well. But anyway, look, let's stop speculating. I don't think there's anything really else we can talk about in that space right now, do you?
No, it'll all be next week.
We've been going for long enough, so I'll skip Cockwomble and Sweets and Smacks.
Willie Rioli's got it for the year.
Yeah, the only contender was the dickhead who was running the notifications on the AFL app last week, and I won't go into specifics. Well, it was a you know how you get your little notifications and they're very short.
Yeah.
The AFL app throws up notifications, and I can't remember exactly the wording, but it was something along the lines of ding dong now, Spud's gone, something or other, and it was just the most. It was just the most tasteless, and they got roasted for it. I'm surprised you guys haven't heard.
No, I didn't hear
but
it.
It was just the most tasteless thing that that's ever flashed up on my phone screen. I actually had to double take. I couldn't. It was that's right. It was a sliding doors thing. It was
which they always start with like a ding dong.
Yeah,
but they didn't think through the connotation.
In fairness to Damien Barrett, I think they were paraphrasing his article, and his article was not flippant in the slightest. It was actually an excellent article from Damien Barrett. But whoever wrote that bloody notification, or if it's auto-generated, no one's checked it. Oh my God, it was tasteless. So any other week, that was Cockwombler of the year, but Willie and his Willie probably out.
Yeah, he would.
And his Gatorade.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, look, thanks everyone. Oh God, in all the chat, I forgot to acknowledge our fantastic supporters. Smith Partners Real Estate, Ryan, up there at Golden Grove. He'd be getting very busy up there at the moment with springtime being selling time in the real estate game. So all the best to Ryan, and we thank him for his ongoing support. If you need any assistance with buying, selling or renting, get up there to Golden Grove and have a chat with Ryan up there at Smith Partners Real Estate. Also, the lads at Down to Earth Electrical for all your electrical data and air conditioning needs. We thank, as always, Tim at Hardware Unboxed. Get around him on YouTube, Hardware Unboxed, if you want any tech reviews. And last but certainly not least, the ongoing support of our fantastic patrons. We've had some fantastic support this year from our listeners on Patreon, and we really do appreciate it. So we can't thank you enough for your ongoing support. So thank you, everyone. If you do want to support the CrowCast, you can get along to patreon.com/AFL CrowCast, or go to aflcrowcast.com and click on the Patreon button. Of course, you can go to aflcrowcast.com and read an aggregated set of news feeds from all around the AFL and also the Adelaide Footy Club. So well worth going to our site there and getting all your AFL and Crows news as well. Guys.
And a nice shout out, as I said in the chat, to Razor Ray, one of our Spreaker chat regulars. He's in the hospital at the moment. So get well soon,
I didn't
Razor.
notice that. Yeah, absolutely, Razor. If you're listening, sorry, I missed that, guys, on the chat completely. But he's on our chat quite regularly, and one of our regular chatters. So all the very best, Razor. Get well soon, and thanks, guys, in the chat for alerting us to that, and get around it. All right, Nikki, Macca, thank you very much for your participation tonight.
Interesting as always.
You had to think what we actually did.
Yeah, we
participated.
Look, we'll be back again next Tuesday, hopefully with Donkey as well, hopefully with a bit more to talk about. Just before we go, your tips for the weekend?
Richmond.
Yes, Richmond.
Yeah, I think Richmond as well.
And the other one.
And I was going for the Giants, but now without Green, I think I might have to go back to Collingwood.
Yeah, I'm going the Giants. I think they're going to make their first GF.
Yeah, I think the Giants, and I actually think, well, out of the Giants and Collingwood, I think they're both actually a really good chance to stop Richmond winning.
Yeah, and in the SANFL, obviously, we're all about Glenelg this week.
Go Glenelg.
So go the Bays.
Go the Bays,
all
yeah.
right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next Tuesday for another edition of Tuesday Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Night all.
Yeah. Good night all.